Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this new episode of The Numbers. Philippe, I'm in a different location. I'm in a second location, which is usually when it's very dangerous if you've been brought to the second location. But I'm here in Percé, and it's beautiful here. And how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's very busy times, right? I mean, not just the three provincial elections and the American election and the fact that we have confidence votes in Ottawa on a daily basis now. So very busy times, but it's going well, and we had a good show today with tons of numbers, and we had also lots of questions from our members on the Discord. So looking forward to dive into this with you.
Well, we should start with, I think, the numbers that got everybody talking this week. So I guess this is it. The Liberals are now in third place, and that's just it. It's just going to keep going. You know, what was really funny is, we'll get into the numbers in a second, but if people remember our over-under that we did in December, we had one of the over-unders was, I think, the number of times, or if the Liberals drop below, I think it was if the Liberals drop below the NDP from multiple pollsters.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I made a comment that what we're going to see, if there's a 21.6 to a 21.5, that we're going to hear from the NDP that now they're in second. And we got pretty much that exact result. Yep. So Main Street, they kind of teased it first that this was going to happen, but the Nanos one came out first. And it had the 42% for the Conservatives, if we're going to round it, 22% for the NDP, 22% for the Liberals, but it was 21.6 for the
Always
NDP,
round. Nope.
21.5 for the Liberals. And then Main Street came out a few days after that and had 44 for the Conservatives, 20 for the NDP, 19 for the Liberals. But again, these are two pollsters that put it out in decimal points, and we saw that the NDP was at 19.9 and the Liberals were at 19.3. There was also an Abacus, 43 Conservative, 21 Liberal, 19 NDP. So, in the same waters.
Yeah.
Is your paradigm shifting?
Okay. Well, the by-elections in La Salle-Verdun and Franscona, we were wondering whether there would be an aftermath. There would be an impact, because rarely do by-elections really matter, right? Sometimes they do, most of the times they don't. And it took some time, I think, for many voters to digest that, to process this information. So I think it's important to say in a podcast that's called The Numbers that the NDP is not above the Liberals. It's a statistical tie. I mean, we see the trend lines, but the NDP has been polling between 15 and 20 for what, 5 years? So that...
5 years, 50 years, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, I'm surprised when we talked about this, whether the Liberals would drop below the NDP. I always figured if it happened, it's because the NDP is like at 24 or something. I did not think that the NDP would remain mostly stable, and it's the Liberals that would drop in the high teens or low 20s. But okay, so we have Main Street and Nanos now, and of course Abacus, 21 Liberal, 19 NDP. It's also a statistical tie. But we are getting into a strange zone now that, I mean, the Liberals' floor, which I thought was around 50 to 60 seats and 21% of the vote, now they're at it. So once you get there, you always wonder, could it get any lower? Could we see a 17 for the Liberals in the near future? And last week, I would have said, well, I don't think so. This week, well, maybe. If we see a 19 and a 20, then a 17 is always possible. But how did you see it this week, Eric?
Well, what's interesting about these numbers is that if we had seen Nanos giving the NDP 21.6%, and that was the only thing we knew, I wouldn't be shocked. We sometimes see them that high.
That's right.
For Main Street, because they often have the NDP quite low. But again, a 19.9 for the NDP, not out of the ordinary, not crazy.
That's right.
It's the fact that the Liberals are now below them. In the Main Street poll, in the regional numbers, what's really kind of interesting about it is that it's not clear that it has a huge impact, because in part the NDP or the Liberals are doing so poorly because they're at single digits in the prairies and in Alberta, doing quite badly in BC. But in, Ontario, Atlantic Canada, Quebec, it's not unusually low numbers. It's bad numbers for terms of the seat count.
Yeah.
But if the NDP, if the Liberals really tank in Western Canada, that is what could drive them being in third place, even if the odds that they still end up with more seats than the New Democrats are still relatively high. That, I think, is what's kind of interesting about this, but it's more of the psychological impact of it.
Oh yeah.
If we start to, if this is just two polls that come out of the woodwork, and then next week we don't see them again, then it won't mean much. But if we start to see a couple more polls, especially from some of the online pollsters, that have the Liberals in third place, that psychological shift could be dramatic, and it could be really damaging to the Liberals.
I mean, this is we feel like I feel like a broken record, but the thing is, things got worse now. It's not 25, it's 20 or 21, and sometimes 19. The odds that we get a new prime minister in the spring went from almost zero to, I don't know what it is now, but it's not zero anymore, right? And
it's probably nearly 100.
And I say a new prime minister, I mean liberal or conservative.
I see.
It's right now. I mean, it looks like the Liberals, as we record this, of course, it could change over the course of the day and the week. The Liberals will not bend to the Bloc's demand, and so we could have another confidence vote by the end of this month. That will pass, and then I look at the calendar. It looks like December 16 for an election. I'm not sure it's the most likely scenario again. We saw many commentators that usually know what they're talking about. Like Chantal Hébert mentioned that the Prime Minister could just prorogue Parliament, resign, and I see at least announce that he would resign at the end of a hasty Liberal leadership campaign. I mean, that would make things very interesting, especially I think you and I, since we do analyze the numbers and we try not to put too much partisanship in it, if the Liberals do prorogue Parliament, it will be very interesting to hear from Liberals to say, well, it's a completely legitimate thing to do, and from Conservatives to say, oh, he's stealing democracy away, and then we can get back to the clips of 2008 when Stephen Harper did the exact same thing, and then we could flip the script, and Conservatives says, well, it's a tool that's given to the Prime Minister, and the Liberals say, oh, Stephen Harper is taking democracy away. So I think this will be very interesting to watch the script flip. Do you think it's likely that that the government that says we need a pause, we need a break here?
What you said about how it was viewed during the Harper years, I think, is huge, because the Liberals actually did a lot, or tried to do a lot, to make prorogation seem illegitimate, right?
Yep.
And now to use it again, which they haven't
Yeah.
used it very often in power. If I'm not mistaken, first of all, they haven't prorogued since the last election. I'm not sure if they prorogued. Maybe they prorogued once. They just haven't used it very much since they've been there. They like to more or less run out the parliamentary session and then go to an election rather than prorogue and then have to do a throne speech. I don't know why. I'm not really convinced that it's actually all that of a good idea. Does it actually do anything? Do voters care? No. Voters don't care if there's a reset because there's a new throne speech. They don't care. They don't watch the throne speech. The throne speech will be given by the Governor General, not by Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
So all it is going to do is set them up for a confidence vote on a throne speech when they return. And if they prorogue and Justin Trudeau does not resign, I think
that's not.
That sends them tanking to 15. I think
Yeah.
people would just see it as illegitimate. Not illegitimate in the sense that they can't do it, but maybe like morally illegitimate.
Yeah.
Right? That they're avoiding a confidence motion, which was the complaint against Harper when he prorogued during the coalition affair. If he announces that he is going to resign, he's going to prorogue Parliament for a Liberal leadership race, and then when it returns, there would be a new Prime Minister in place. That minimizes some of the damage, but it does open them up to the charge that they are putting their partisan party affairs before that of the country, that they need to prorogue Parliament, can't pass any laws because we need to choose a new party leader. I just don't see it as a very good option. Maybe it's the least bad option. I don't know. But I'm not convinced that it is something that that really changes anything.
It is a bad option, and it will be seen by voters that don't like the Liberals as much. But I feel like if you're just going to prorogue just to come back later, or if you're going to prorogue because we need a new leader and we need some time to do it, I think some voters would be fine with that. Okay, get your stuff together. The other parties will be election ready because election will be very soon. But again, we talk about this like we think Justin Trudeau is going to resign, and the way he's speaking, it doesn't seem like it's on his mind, and even with those numbers. So anyway,
will they even be able to get to a prorogation if they even get to that choice at the end of the session or the end of the season? I will say, just because the season, the holiday season, because yes, the Bloc is not. It's seemingly not going to get its OAS demands. The Liberals really seem to be messaging that they're not keen on it, and they voted against it. Now, they still could allow it to go through after voting against it and say it was the will of Parliament, but you're not seeing that kind of messaging from them, so we'll see if they're going to move on that. But if the NDP sees themselves in second in a couple polls, do they start thinking, hey, we're all going to get beaten down by the Conservatives anyway, might as well try to finish second? I don't know. I'm not sure. If you're Jagmeet Singh and the New Democrats, you see these kinds of numbers, are you starting to think, hey, maybe we are a little bit more election ready than we thought? And the more of these polls that we see that have the NDP in second, even if it is statistically insignificant, the repercussions could be much more significant.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just... Okay, so some people are painting the trend lines. Well, it was 25 and it's 20, so the Liberals will be at 15 next month. I don't think it works that way. And again, in a seat projection, I'm sorry.
It's like Disco Stew looking at the rise of disco music in the 1970s, right?
The thing is,
these trends continue.
The NDP needs to do well in the West to win seats. They're not going to win seats in the East, or not that many. And even if they're tied with the Liberals, they're going to get crushed by the Conservatives in the West. So how many NDP seats are there in Atlantic Canada and in Quebec? Combined, at most, I think 4, at most. In Ontario, 5 or 6. So sorry, the Liberals, even in bad times, will win more on the island of Montreal than the NDP will win in the East. So if they start thinking that way, they drank their own Kool-Aid, because that's not what the numbers say. At least I don't know, but unless I see a strong showing for the NDP, I say like a 30% in BC or something. Now we're talking. But if the Conservatives are nearing 50% in British Columbia, and the NDP, we're in second place, yeah, but you're 30 points behind, you will win a couple of seats downtown Vancouver, and that's it. And island of Vancouver as well. But I don't know. I hope they don't become overconfident, like, well, we're only 25 points behind now, so we could be in good shape for an election. Oh my God, I guess we'll see, but this could, things could change by the end of this podcast. You will listen to this, and perhaps the government would have fallen or something. We could have an accidental election this fall. Wow. It's funny because we're 10 minutes in and we still haven't mentioned the actual campaigns. I know we'll get there, but at the federal level, it's been quite a ride lately.
And if you're listening to this on Friday or Saturday and the government has fallen, don't worry, we'll come out with a bonus episode before next week. We'll do that. Well, then let's get to the campaigns that are ongoing. So New Brunswick and Saskatchewan hasn't seen any new polls since we last chatted, so we'll just wait and see what's going to happen there. British Columbia, though.
Oh, tons of polls.
It is, the trends are turning mildly. We'll say there's not dramatic movement, but they're not moving in the favor of the BC New Democrats.
So, okay, one of the questions that we had from our members that I noted on our document here was, how much stock do you put in the Main Street Daily Tracker? And I'm not dissing Main Street here because I want to be very careful what I say. I'm not dissing at all. It's good that we have a tracker, I think, but the daily movement has been overblown. If you look from day one, I think we're day 9 today, it hasn't moved outside of 44% plus or minus 3 for either parties. Well, the Greens are 9, 10, 11. But the movement we see is minuscule compared to the uncertainty in those polls. So it's still a tie between both parties. But Leger on Wednesday published its newest BC poll, and even though, again, it's still a statistical tie, it kind of flipped a little bit. 46% for the British Columbia Conservatives, 43% for the incumbent NDP, and 10% for the Green, a 3-point lead. Eric, did you take time to look the details of that poll, because some of that stuff really surprised me. I would like to hear what you have to say first.
Well, it goes back to what we had chatted about the last time there was the Leger poll, and Leger is going to have one every week. They're going to be coming out on a weekly basis. So
fantastic.
It's that the Metro Vancouver numbers are holding for the Conservatives. In fact, they're getting better. You could argue that maybe it's too small to say that, but in their first poll in which was just before the writ drop, the Conservatives are ahead by 3 points in Metro Vancouver. The next week, there was a 1-point gap. Now it's a 5-point gap. 5-point gap, starting to get a little bit more. It's probably still within the margin of error with the sample sizes, but it's starting to get a little bit more pronounced. And also, it's holding. And that would be the death knell for the BC NDP, because what they had going for them before was that even if they were tied or maybe a point or two behind in the provincial numbers, the assumption was that that was because the Conservatives were running up the numbers in the interior more than the NDP would run up the numbers in Vancouver and Vancouver Island. But with these, you're not seeing that. It is the Conservatives doing well in Metro Vancouver, which means they can win all those seats kind of on the southern part of Greater Vancouver, Surrey, Richmond, Langley, places like that. And that's enough. That's enough to beat the NDP with these kinds of numbers. And when's the last time we saw a poll with the NDP ahead?
Well, I can tell you that.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. I mean, it's it's been a while. It's been longer than we. Again, thing is, the NDP has the map advantage, but it's not true anymore if they don't lead in Metro Vancouver, right? And so, okay. So to go back to these numbers, so Leger has Metro Vancouver 47% Conservative, 42% NDP, 5-point gap, still close, but not trending in the right direction for the NDP, and very good numbers for the Conservatives. But then I look at rest of BC. So Leger has Metro Vancouver, Vancouver Island, and rest of BC. Of course, rest of BC is pretty big and varied. It's not uniform. But I see 48% for the Conservatives in the rest of BC, 39% for the NDP. Last week, it was 52-36. So the NDP doing a little better in the interior, but still trailing by 9 points. Do you believe that the Conservatives are polling as high in Metro Vancouver as they are in the interior? That seems strange to me. I mean, it's possible. That's what the numbers say. It's just that it's not intuitive, right?
No, it's not, right? But the thing is, I would imagine that if anything is going to be off, it'll be an underestimation of the Conservatives in the interior, right? Yeah. Rather than an overestimation in Metro Van. So that's still problematic for the NDP. You look at the chart that Leger has where they didn't take out the undecideds. Yeah. It's not that the NDP is losing support. It's that as the campaign is going on, the Conservatives are converting more fence sitters, right?
Yep.
Because they had, since their first poll, the NDP has not changed.
Nope.
They have 35% support among all voters, so that doesn't exclude undecideds. They're still at 35%. That's where they started the campaign. But the Conservatives have gone up 4 points, and it's the number of people who say they would not vote or they're not sure that has dropped. And so that's bad news for the NDP, because their kind of plan for the election is that as people get to know John Rustad and the Conservatives, they will be put off by them and they will come back to the NDP. But we're not seeing that in these kinds of numbers. So I mean, there'll be a debate, I think, soon. I mean, the NDP is really going to have to knock this one out of the park. David Eby and John Rustad really going to have to fall on his face, I think, to turn this around, because like the numbers don't move. I know there's been so much movement in the polls in BC over the last little while, but this is a kind of traditional race in BC that we've seen for most of the last 20 years, where the NDP and the right of center party, used to be the Liberals, somewhere in the low to mid 40s, and then it goes up by a point or two, and then it's like an American election. There's not that many people up for grabs anymore. So we'll see what's going to happen here. But for the NDP, they got to turn this around, because if they're now, I believe, if they're behind by a point or two or three, I don't think they win the election. I don't think they have a good shot of it.
You just mentioned the leaders' debate. There's been a leaders' debate already, but there's another one on October 8th. So last chance for Mr. Eby to retake this. And to answer your question from earlier, I was looking it up. The last time the NDP was straight up ahead, Polara, late September, NDP +3. And since then, it's either been a tie or a small conservative lead. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not surprised, really. It's interesting to see the numbers move and to see how, the Conservatives, by eating up BC Liberals, United, I mean, how they've been competitive and a near tie with the NDP. This is not really surprising when you look at past elections. Remember on the previous podcast, Eric, you mentioned the results of BC Liberals and NDP. They're always neck and neck.
Oh, yeah.
Right? 2020 was the outlier. 2017 was more of the natural cause. We're back to this now. It's just that M. Rostad is a different kind of politician that the other. I mean, he's not Christy Clark, and I don't mean in character, or Gordon Campbell. He's further entrenched in the right, and we could see the three Western province soon with Daniel Smith, Scott Moe, and John Rostad. So that will be an interesting combination, and three people that will expect a lot from future Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre. So
indeed, that's what I was just thinking.
Yeah.
It might not be three people that Poilievre really does want to sit around a table with when he actually has to make some decisions on who gets what. So, hey, that'll be an interesting one.
We'll see that in time.
Why don't we move on? We got a poll from Quebec.
That's right.
It was commissioned by some ragamuffin.
Some loser.
No, not our favorite. Our favorite. It was you who commissioned it from Palace Data for l'Actualité. Here, let me do the top line, since you've probably repeated them so much you can say them in your sleep.
Go ahead.
The Parti Québécois was leading. That right, 43%?
Wait. No, it's the number. Sorry. 34.
It was 34. Okay.
Little typo.
Yeah, little typo. We'll reverse those numbers. The CEQ was at 22%,
Yeah.
the Liberals 18%, the Conservatives 14%, and Quebec City there at 12%. I mean, they're not, to me, just like looking at the top lines, kind of not having that much time to digest them. Kind of in line with everything we've seen, with the one exception that maybe there was an indication the CEQ was taking back some of that ground that they lost.
Yeah.
I think those would be my thoughts, but you've had much more time to immerse yourself in these. So give us your rundown of what this means.
So I think I've said this publicly a few times on this podcast and on Les Chiffres en français. I will commission like once per trimester. I don't want to do it too often. I have to pay for this. It's not a gift from Palace. So the Parti Québécois and the CEQ in the Léger poll in August were closer. The gap was only 5 points. And when we dove into the numbers from Léger, we saw that, over the summer, satisfaction went up a little bit. Dissatisfaction went down a little bit. And that often happens in the summertime when people are in a better mood and they don't really see the government in action. They don't see the daily games at Parliament, National Assembly. We see that very often. The question is always when they start jousting again, can the government, keep that summer momentum? And it's often not the case. So we'll wait until we see another Léger poll. But as for Palace, these numbers are almost identical to the ones we saw in June when I last commissioned a poll from Palace. A 12-point gap on top for the Parti Québécois. More importantly, among the francophone majority in Quebec, the PQ is 19 points ahead. 19 points ahead the CAQ. This would be a majority government, and I know some of our listeners, very big fans of proportional representation, pulling their hair out to see a party with a third of the vote winning a majority. Well, that's what would happen because of the split vote. But some numbers that will be published Thursday afternoon in L'Actualité is the second part of the poll, and it focused on the favorability numbers of each leaders. And I asked this specific same question in June so we can have same wording, same poster, same samples, so we can have the comparison. In June, when you asked, do you have a favorable impression or unfavorable impression of the Premier, Legault had pretty poor numbers. He had 60% unfavorable and 23% favorables. That's a minus 37. That's pretty bad. Well, it's gotten worse. I mean, I'm shocked to see the numbers. 65% negative and only 17% positive for the Premier. That's a minus 46. And so I asked David Coletto of Abacus Data, who also asked this question at the federal level. Obviously, it's a different firm, but it's the same wording. Positive impression, negative impression, right? In Quebec only, Trudeau has 28 favorable and 48 unfavorable. He's a minus 20. Legault is a minus 46, and Justin Trudeau in Quebec is a minus 20. And we spent the last 12 months saying how Justin Trudeau is unpopular and he has to leave. These are atrocious numbers for the Premier in Quebec. And there's no way the CAQ can claw its way back with a leader that's so unpopular. So that's what blew me away most of this poll, not the voting intentions. I mean, even though Quebec Solidaire in 5th place, I mean, it's still close, right? It's a fluctuation maybe, but that has to sting. Quebec Solidaire in 5th place for them. But,
well, just looking at those favorability numbers, because you have the chart there in front of us, just to see the growth, the improvement in the position for Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, and the deterioration for Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois of Quebec Solidaire. That's kind of interesting too, right? That you're seeing that on that side, on the sovereignist side, though, you know, whether they're both on the left exactly is up for debate, but that you're seeing that as things are going on, Saint-Pierre Plamondon is improving his numbers, which will make it all the harder for Quebec Solidaire to try to get back some of the sovereignist voters they've lost to the Parti Québécois over the last little while. So interesting results. We're looking forward to the next trimester. We don't really in English, I don't think. For the next quarterly polling.
Quarterly, that's the word.
Quarterly. Yeah. Do you want to move to the questions?
Yes, absolutely. So we had a few good ones, and since you were away this week, I had to collect them, and I realized I didn't ask on the Patreon. I only asked on the Discord.
That's my...
Yeah, but it's okay because we had some really good questions. So, okay, let me get this. Matt the Qubit. We talked about this. How plausible do you think that we will get a prorogue government in the next few weeks? So it seems like an extreme, act to get underway, but it looks more plausible, right?
I mean, maybe I'd give it like a 1 in 4 chance that they do it just to do something different, and come back with a throne speech. If they feel like they're going to lose on a budget anyway, maybe it's better to lose on a throne speech where you can lay out a plan forward that's not just a budget. But again, it's not something that's announced by the Prime Minister, so I don't see the really strong argument for it aside from surviving for a few more months. But surviving for that few more months comes at the expense of facing the executioner at the end of those months. So I just don't see it. I just don't see a good reason for it, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. So I'll say it's 1 in 4, because out of all the options on the table, it's probably 1 of 4 of them.
The only good reason to prorogue is to change leaders for me. Otherwise, that would be just it would be a very bad look. And I don't think the Liberals have pro-parliament. Maybe I'll vote for them. No, it's just a bad look. But if they change leaders, I think it will be acceptable.
How about this? And we'll do this question, and then we'll move to the Patreon-only questions. So again, you can join us at thenumberspod.ca and get the bonus episodes, the extended mailbags, and all that kind of stuff. So you can do that at thenumberspod.ca. And again, apologies for the Patreon people. That was on me. I should have thought that I had to actually post the call out for questions. Christian Odette, here he says, before you guys had chatted about how the floor of the Liberals in polling was 20%. Now that we've seen a 19% in 2 polls showing the NDP with a slim lead, what is their new floor? Didn't Abacus have some numbers showing that only 7% of the population were committed Liberal voters?
Yeah, but is that a surprise, though? I mean, it's
a surprise if we had been talking 10 years ago.
Well, 10 years ago, the Liberals were not in good shape. Well, 10 years ago, they had the new...
They were leading in the polls 10 years ago.
Yeah, but they were leading in the low 30s, right? And so, okay. Thing is, if you hit your floor, that doesn't mean you can go lower. It could mean that. So, I mean, we said the floor was 20% and they just hit it. So what's the real floor? We do not know, but it still could be 20%. I mean, next week, the Nanos tracker fluctuates a lot. We could see 24 for the Liberals next week, right? What I'm surprised at is that how fast those numbers moved in Nanos. Nanos has 250 cases per week, so that was a really bad week for the Liberals. They were probably in single digits in that small sample to get those numbers. So we'll see. I'm not sure what the answer is. Ontario and Quebec hasn't moved that much. That's the thing. Yeah. It's in the West.
Well, the thing is, I was going to say, the floor for the Liberals historically has now been 19%, because that's what Michael Ignatieff got.
Yeah.
I can see Trudeau doing as badly as Ignatieff did in Western Canada. I have a bit more trouble seeing Trudeau doing worse in Atlantic Canada than Ignatieff.
Yeah.
In Ontario, I think they still got around 25% in that election. So they're matching that now. And then in Quebec, you got to think that Trudeau, as unpopular as he might be, as you noted in that poll, not that unpopular in Quebec. And so the floor for the Liberals in Quebec, I think, is higher than it was in the Ignatieff and maybe even the Dion years. It's hard to imagine them dropping below 20%. So if they're at 25 in Ontario, 25 in Quebec, 2025, again, another 25 in Atlantic Canada, the fact that they do so badly in the West brings them down maybe to 20, 19, 18, but it's hard to see them dropping more than that right now. So you said you didn't have a quiz for me, but you know what? I'm going to give you a very mini quiz.
Okay. All right.
This is a quiz on the fly. We saw some polls with the NDP in second place. So the last time that the NDP actually finished second place was the 2011 federal election. So you have, I'm going to make this a bit tougher for you, 10 provinces, 3 territories. In which ones did the NDP finish in second ahead of the Liberals in the 2011 election? I will say not just in second, but where the NDP finished ahead of the Liberals in 2011.
In
got
votes
10 provinces,
or in seats?
3 territories.
Votes or in
vote?
Seats?
In vote.
Okay. The NDP finished ahead of the Liberals in every province except Newfoundland. I'm not sure about the territories.
This is your final answer?
Well, the thing is, it's wrong, but if I'm close to the pin, I'll be happy. I know not in Newfoundland. Michael Ignatieff strangely did okay in Newfoundland. Did Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba. So every province, Quebec and West, the NDP finished ahead. Not sure about the Maritimes.
That is correct. Yes, that is correct.
About the Maritimes. Oh, maybe not New Brunswick. Okay, so I'll say Quebec, Ontario, and West, PEI, and Nova Scotia.
And Nova Scotia, that they finished ahead?
Yep.
That is not correct for the Maritimes.
Oh, okay.
The NDP finished. So the NDP, and what about the territories? You got to give me a guess before I give the answers.
Okay, I'll say the Conservatives won Yukon, Northwest. Did they win Nunavut? No, I don't think they win Nunavut. Okay, so I'll say Nunavut, the NDP finished ahead of the Liberals.
I'm going to, this is not going to be a pass for you, I have to say,
I'm sorry.
sir. So the NDP finished in second place in British Columbia. They beat the Liberals by about 20 points, but they're behind the Conservatives. The Conservatives had a 50-point lead on the NDP in Alberta. The Liberals were 7 points back of that. The Conservatives won Saskatchewan by 24 points, but the NDP finished with 32%, so they're quite ahead of the 9% for the Liberals. Ooh. It was 26% for the NDP to 17% in Manitoba. In Ontario, the Conservatives had 44%, pretty much where they are right now in the polls. The NDP was at 25.6. The Liberals were at 25.3, so just behind. Yep. Obviously, in Quebec, the NDP finished first, and the Liberals finished fourth. New Brunswick, NDP second, 30% to 23% for the Liberals. Nova Scotia, NDP second, 30% to 29% for the Liberals. But here's where you're wrong. PEI. NDP didn't finish second in PEI. What are you talking about? They got 15% of the vote. 15% of the vote. The Liberals had 41. The Conservatives had 41.2. And then finally, Newfoundland and Labrador. The Liberals actually won the province, 38%. The NDP was second, 33. The Conservatives at 28. And then in the territories...
You misguided me here. You misguided me. I said every province except Newfoundland, and you were like, I almost had it. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you almost had it. In Yukon, Conservatives were first, Liberals second, NDP third. In the Northwest Territories, NDP first, Conservatives second, Liberals third. And in Nunavut, the Conservatives did win that. That was the Leona Lukac. 50%. The NDP was third there. And the Liberals finished second. So the NDP now holds Nunavut. So it shows how that changed. So a little bit of a different map than what we'd see today, I would think, in some parts. But I think that's the Ontario numbers that are the interesting ones to me. That Ignatieff still got 25% of the vote in Ontario.
Yeah.
Which is where the Liberals usually are.
Yeah.
Right now. So it just goes to show. All right, so that was our little test for 2011. Philippe does not pass this edition of the quiz. For number of the week, I just kind of thought of one just now, so why don't I go? Mine will be 0.1, the gap between the NDP and the Liberals in that Nanos poll. But I saw a chart, I think it might have been on CTV or something like that, and it had the Conservatives on the top, the NDP in second, and the Liberals in third. And I just think that the more people see that, the more dangerous it is for the Liberals. So it doesn't matter if it's extremely statistically insignificant.
Yeah.
0.1 is a problem for the Liberals.
My number is 64%. Likelihood of voting in BC, according to Leger, 64% say definitely vote, 13% very likely. So that would be, 77%. It's all fine and good. I'm betting that the turnout in this BC election will not be 77%, but it's still very interesting.
Don't think so.
It looks like the people in BC are more engaged than many elections in the past. And also, when they ask you, are you likely to switch your vote? 50% say not at all. 26% say not very likely. So it looks baked in. So that's why it will be a matter of ground game and get out your vote. Maybe the NDP has a slight advantage in there, but that's just going with conventional wisdom, and sometimes conventional wisdom is wrong, especially with this election in BC, where there's no conventional wisdom. We are in uncharted territories.
Yep, 16 days to go from when we're recording, and they could be pretty important for both parties. So, Philippe, thanks very much for this episode. That'll be it for the numbers. And, of course, if you want to support our work, get access to the Patreon-only episodes every 2 weeks, the extended mailbag, access to the Discord, episodes on Thursdays rather than Fridays, you can join at thenumberspod.ca. We appreciate your support. And, Philippe, I hope you have a good week, and we'll chat again in 7 days.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Eric. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Have a great week.